Welcome back to the show, People Who Believe. Thank you those of you who joined us for part one. For those of you who might just be tuning in now, in part one, we took a look at this church which we're visiting right now, which is St. Gabriel's Church in northwest London, an Anglican church. And we would like to thank the staff for their kind hospitality. But from the things I've learnt, I found the history of the church extremely fascinating, and particularly the architecture fascinating. From speaking to people and from finding out a little bit about the architecture, we were able to discern and determine that this church, primarily in the architecture, revolves around a theme. That theme being the angel Jibreel, alayhi salam, who in the Christian Judeo tradition is the angel of revelation who brings revelation to the prophets. Now, for those of you who have been anticipating this, we will be interviewing Vicar Jane, the person who is in charge of this church, to speak to her about the theme of secularism, which was our theme for today. Vicar Jane, before we start with the program, could you please give us a brief elaboration about yourself? Maybe tell us a few biographical details that would be most helpful.
Yes, I'm Jane Morris. I'm the Vicar of St. Gabriel's. That means that my role is to be here as the leader of this Christian community and in our whole area to just have a care for people in the whole area and in the wider community, to enable the worship of God to happen here and to make room for other people in the church to serve and worship God as God calls them to. I used to be a scientist. I was a chemistry teacher in different schools, and some years ago I stopped doing that, left that secular employment and became and studied for and became a minister in the Church of England.
Thank you very much for that. And my second question would be, what areas do you think that religion and particularly Christianity can contribute to British society and indeed has contributed to British society? And do you feel that society will be lacking if religion is moved from the public sphere?
I think people have changed from seeing what they interpret religion as in the wider public, yes, definitely. But for me, I'm thinking that there are people who've got a personal faith that's important to them, and it used to be perhaps people had religion as an external thing, and maybe that's a good thing, because the external practice of something is just like a shell. Actually, having a lively personal faith, to me, is at the heart of what is there. So when someone says, "Are you a religious person?" I may be surprised and say, "No, I don't do religion. Actually, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ." But so when people come to our community expecting us to be religious, maybe they're surprised to find we're not, but actually we are people who have a personal and lively faith that changes our lives. We run an alpha course that we call, which is looking for the meaning of life and letting people ask their questions, and we have people coming to that on a regular basis and asking questions. Maybe some of them, they've had a dream about Jesus. Who is this man, this prophet that I'm dreaming about? Or maybe someone's some experience in their life, they've gone through tough times. I reckon that almost everybody will pray when things are hard, and we've got a natural hunger after God. So we're seeing people coming to find faith. Absolutely, yes. We are made by God to be worshippers. We've got something within us that is hungry for God. People try and fill it with other things, and we would say in old-fashioned parlance, you'd say the world, the flesh and the devil. People we're seduced by those things away, and sometimes we choose to go away from God. But if we try and fill that gap created in each one of us to be in a relationship with God, with other things, we're inevitably hungry. And so people try and fill it with other things, but they're not satisfied. And actually, we're finding people are looking for a spiritual reality that's the real thing. Quite a long time ago, the Roman Empire became Christian when Constantine converted to a Christian, and that changed a whole lot of laws, and actually the heritage of the whole legal educational system here came down in a tradition that embraces Judaism, Christianity and Islam, and having these basic values of people of the book. But in recent years, those boundaries have been moving quite a lot. For example, even 20 years ago, we had Sunday trading laws where one day in 7 there would be a day of rest, everywhere would be closed, and the law was changed, and secular commercial pressures changed, so that people have shops open and expect to work 7 days a week, and sometimes I know people find it quite hard to resist their employers requiring them to work almost all the time. And on a Sunday when Christians might be in church worshipping, their employer might be pressurizing them to work. Or, for example, the norm for ethics and morality. It's like a moving boundary from secular society, whereas for me, I see some of those things as being, God has fixed them. They're not movable, and we've just been looking at the Ten Commandments and looking at how God set good boundaries around us within which we would know His life. But the law perhaps is moving those boundaries, and I might find myself outside the law in some time. That would be an unusual position from a whole inheritance where the law and Christian faith and values have been the same thing.
One crucial question I wanted to ask was, we as Muslims and you as Christians, we as believing people of any religion, but particularly we as Islam and Christianity, two Abrahamic faith traditions, what do you think would be our common aims in working to fight the current tide of secularism which comes upon us like a great wave of destruction?
I often have thought that say if there was a shop opening on our high road between our two buildings that wanted to sell or publish immorality, we would have more in common with one another in wanting to see that not there for our children and our families and our community than we might do with the secular authorities who would just be looking to license a shop that was seen by them as the same sort of shop. I sometimes think in terms of seeing Jesus, we would see Jesus as a prophet, as I understand Islam would. Maybe we would see him as more than that. But actually in his life and his teachings and being followers of Jesus, I would think we're followers of Jesus. And that maybe we have that in common.
Another question I had for you, and this is a very crucial question, and I feel it's based on a heavy misunderstanding of Christianity, is one thing we as non-Christians often hear about Christianity is that it is a religion which preaches radical secularism, a distinction between church and state, in the sense that they quote Jesus from the Bible as saying, render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar and render unto God what belongs to God. This gives the imagery that the kingdom of God and any working for God is to be distinct and separate from state. Could I perhaps ask for you to give a brief exegesis and analysis of how you understand these verses and whether or not, in your opinion, they do actually teach a radical understanding of secularism?
It's interesting because when Jesus answered that question, it was towards someone trying to trap him with words, saying, should we do this or should we do that? And they were trying to trap him into an either-or answer. And he was saying to live your life as a whole, really, to if you have money and you need to pay taxes, you are actually part of this world. The taxes that you pay go to provide facilities, and in our case hospitals and schools. We should be citizens of our country, but equally we know we're citizens of another country, we're citizens of a heavenly country. So I want to have my relationship with God first in my life, in terms of my prayer and my understanding, my love for God fuels my wanting to serve and love all of this society. Perhaps Jesus put that question in a different way when he said, I want people who follow me to be both salt and light. By that he said, you to be a light on a hill. So shine out. We're all gathered together to shine out the light of Christ into a secular society. And in the same sentence he says, but be salt. i.e., salt is distributed out. It keeps things pure. It brings flavour to where it is. It changes where it is. So if we withdraw from the world, we leave it to rot in a sense, whereas if we're there and involved in our communities and our offices and declaring the values and the faith that we have, we change and make that place pure. So the art, I suppose, is for me to live as a person of faith, pure, and as a Christian, I value purity and modesty and holiness and walking with God. Yes. But I want to be in the world, as Jesus said, to be in the world but not of it. I want to be there to love and share and live my life and hopefully show who Christ is. But I need to be of the kingdom of God. And that's a hard thing to hold those together, a challenge.
The final question we wanted to ask, and this is quite key here, is, as we've been discussing throughout this whole theme, secularism is becoming dominant in this society. It wishes to push religion out. Which areas do you feel personally that Christianity as a religion specifically has helped to contribute towards and does contribute towards things which maybe secularism does not? And how do you think Christianity can maybe better society despite secularism?
I think Christians have always had a strong desire for social justice and compassion, and expressing that compassion practically, because God is compassionate and we're there to, if you like, to be his hands and his feet to show and share that. So I think in the history of this country, hospitals and schools and care for the poor and care for the homeless, at one time there was no state. That was the church, was expressing that and living it out. Now, it was a very divided society, with often the rich were handing out to the poor, and I think we aspire to be more of a community in our society, but often the poor are still there. I think Jesus said once, the poor you will always have with you. Sadly, there's plenty of need around. So here in St. Gabriel's Church, we're just opening a debt counselling service. We open the church, the community, and people of all faiths come here, parents and little children, and they make friends. Somebody came the other week and said, I never had any friends till I came here, but now I'm in a community. And we're trying in a number of practical ways. We have a community night where we can help and assist people in our community. We've had a mental health support group. We have English classes because we find lots of people come to this community in English. Helping them have good English is the best way we can help them access help and education and employment and give them a helping hand along the way. So I suppose in lots of ways hospitality, perhaps that's something we have in common, is a strong value for us. And because we're a community, a Christian community of people from every nation, the food here is fantastic. When we serve a meal, it's like a sign of the kingdom of God, but actually we have food from every country in the world, and but actually sharing food together it's a sacred thing, isn't it, to sit down with someone, share food together, is a sign of friendship, and that's really important to us. We hope at Christmas to be having a big Christmas dinner for invited guests who are on their own, who are lonely, who are poor, who are homeless, and we're gathering them together here, just as an expression of showing the love of Christ for the poor, God on the side of the poor. So that's an important value for us, yes.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the last century, or we could say from the 20th century till today, we see that there has been a rise of secularism, and it's been more difficult to understand different sects or different religions, or the details of different sects. It's become much more difficult. As I've seen, it's going to the church or going to the mosque or going to the synagogue from a different faith. It's been much more difficult today. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Holy Quran says, وَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانْظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. Go search and travel within the earth and see the response and the activities of those who lived before you. If we don't understand how the previous religions or different sects, how they live or how they communicate with one another, we're not going to be able to progress in life. It has a negative impact, and we're not going to be able to understand one another, and there's going to be a lack of communication between the two. Indeed, having this idea of building relations and building a solid communication between the two is a positive aspect, and I think Islam in itself, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, from many lessons from the Ahlulbayt, where the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he had the treaty with the non-Muslims, the Christians, the Jews, and even the people who are not even from the Abrahamic faiths, the kuffar, the mushrikeen, the Holy Prophet ﷺ built many relations in terms of communication, and to have a safer building between the two, it is important. And I think every community should give a further reach, a further hands forward to communicate with one another. And if we progress, it would be by building relations between the different sects and different faiths. In the society today, one who believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if he portrays that he's a Muslim, I personally believe that he would be able to live and coexist within the community. And Islam in itself teaches us that the best practice and the best way of life, and if we learn from the example of the Holy Prophet ﷺ, how to live in the community that is a non-Muslim community, then that in itself is going to allow us to progress and show that the method and the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, the Prophet of Islam, living in a Muslim society with a Muslim belief would be the best practice for us, inshallah.
So, We've actually finished all of our interviews, and it seems that our work here in St. Gabriel's Church is now over. Vicar Jane and her crew here have been most hospitable towards us, and we've enjoyed our conversations. So far we've heard Vicar Jane, we've interviewed some of the congregation, we've interviewed some of her co-workers, and we've talked a little bit about the architecture of this building. If anything I've learnt, I found it extremely surprising that Vicar Jane and her fellow co-workers, despite the fact of recognising that secularism is a growing threat, one that is trying to push religion out of the main sphere of life, they did not by any means feel fazed by this, nor did they feel threatened by it. Rather, they felt it was a good opportunity for those we people of faith to spread our religious values and show ourselves as exemplars in society who have much to offer and have things that we can give to this society that secularism cannot offer. Inshallah, you'll join us next week when we'll have a brand new show in a different place of worship, in a different religious community. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Ahlulbayt TV, the holy household for every household.